This week on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast, Reverend Andy Daughtry and myself, Wendell Carr, talk about mixed groups. Now, while we typically think of a male quartet in Southern gospel music, there are numbers of mixed groups who have made Southern gospel music what it is today. We also continue with part 2 of our interview with Mr. Eddie Crook, pianist, arranger, producer, and member of the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. That's all coming up on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast.
You are now listening to the Grand Old Gospel Podcast, live from the beautiful city of Roses in Thomasville, Georgia. We're so glad you joined us today as two guys who love Southern gospel music have a nostalgic celebration of the individuals and groups whose musical legacy have left a lasting mark on Southern gospel music. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Wendell Carr and Andy Daughtry.
And thank you very much. We're glad to be here today on another Grand Old Gospel Podcast. I'm Wendell Carr. I'm your host, and along with me in the studio today, we have Reverend Andy Daughtry.
And good afternoon, evening, or whatever time you may be listening to the podcast. And we're glad that you've joined us on the journey here on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. Good to be with you, my brother.
This week, let's go a little bit of a different route. We traditionally, when we think of Southern gospel music, we traditionally think of the 4 males and the piano player,
right?
You know, the male quartet.
Right.
But upon closer inspection, there actually is a significant part of the Southern gospel music history that is made possible by mixed groups.
The sopranos and the altos.
Boy, don't we need them.
We need them. And particularly when the key gets high. And we have discovered that in our own performing lifetimes, haven't we? Yes, there have been a significant number of mixed groups who have left an incredible legacy and continue to be an incredible and wonderful part of Southern gospel music. When I think back to the pioneers of mixed groups, certainly the first that comes to my mind is the Singing Spear family, and Mom and Dad, and originally the group in 1921, I believe, Mom and Dad Spear, and Dad Spear's sister, Aunt Pearl, and her husband were the original members of that group. And then, of course, later on the family, and of course, what a tremendous legacy with the Spear family of mixed groups, and they were originally part on the quartet convention, and were leaders in that mixed group. Then who can forget about the wonderful old time singing Chuck Wagon Gang from Fort Worth, Texas, and another great family group with Dad Carter and different brothers taking different points. But probably the most well-known group had sisters Rose and Anna on the soprano and the alto. So the Spears and the Chucks. And the Chuck were very unique with their guitar accompaniment, very simple, straightforward harmonies, very refreshing when they came on the scene, the national scene. And so those were two great groups. Who've been some of your favorite mixed along that time? Maybe coming into the late, now we're moving into the 50s.
Moving into the 50s, into the 60s, of course, the Weatherfords, when Lily Fern would be with them, as we talked with Henry Slaughter last week. That was a great sound that they had. And then, of course, the Lefevres, and they just absolutely hit the scene.
May as an MC, even.
Absolutely, which is, quite unusual. But, again, these people left their mark. And then you get into the 60s with the Goodmans.
Yes.
Of course, Naomi and the Seagos.
Yes. Hopper Brothers and Connie coming a little behind
Hopper Brothers and Connie, absolutely. These are groups.
Still on the scene.
Still on the scene even today.
Yeah. Some others we had mentioned, the Lewis family. Now, they more gospel, Southern, bluegrass gospel.
More bluegrass gospel.
And bluegrass gospel, another tremendous mixed group with a long heritage. The McCameys coming more into the latter day. Of course, who could hear? What about the Tally Trio?
Tally Trio, or the original Tallies.
Yes.
Kirk left the Cathedral Quartet to go sing with his brother and sister-in-law.
That's right.
Forming the original Tallies. Yeah, the Nealons, which was actually an offspring of
the Lefevres.
The Lefevres.
When he bought the group.
So,
and
right.
Tremendous. They're still singing. Kelly has still got a great group. They've got a top 10 this month. This is speaking of June 2020. Got a top 10 in the single out right now. So they're still doing alive and well in the mixed group with the number 1 in June 2020, the Perrys, another incredible mixed group.
Perrys, and you've got the Collingsworth family, the Crabb family. So there is a definite influx of mixed groups that sometimes I feel like we may overlook a little when we talk about Southern gospel music, but they have certainly been a part of that foundation and that ongoing process that just brings us this wonderful music that we enjoy so much.
Absolutely. And I have found the wonderful ability to arrange and change the vocal stacking. There's a tremendous flexibility with a mixed group, and a lot of musical interest you can create when you know how to really exploit that. And sometimes they're just built around really great girl singers. You think of those outstanding ones. And I remember, Henry Slaughter said when Lily Fern wasn't with us, we sounded like everybody else. When she was with us is when we really sounded unique and were more successful. But that's what I enjoy about the mixed groups. And boy, there have been some great ones in our Southern gospel history.
Gospel music trivia.
In the earliest Blackwood Brothers quartet, what part did James Blackwood sing? We'll have the surprising answer when we return.
The Grand Old Gospel Podcast.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of the Grand Old Gospel Podcast by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you, and we thank you for your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
James Blackwood of the Blackwood Brothers Quartet sang this part in the earliest version of the quartet. The answer? Baritone. But he sang the part an octave high. And that's today's Southern Gospel Trivia.
More gospel music memories.
Today we continue with part 2 of our interview with Mr. Eddie Crook, pianist, arranger, producer, and member of the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. Now, later on in your career, you actually formed your own company, the Eddie Crook Company. And a lot of artists really benefited from that because you helped bring them from basic obscurity into, some form of the national stage. And just naming some of those, the Isaacs, the McCameys, the Bishops, the Crabb family, the Perrys. You helped mold an entire generation of music there. Let's talk a little bit about your company and how that during that time period.
Well, of course, and when I was with the Goodmans in Madisonville, like I said, we were recording every day and night up there, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Different singing groups would come in and record, and sometimes Rusty would produce it. Sometimes he'd walk away and say, "You take it." And so there came a time when I decided I would spring out on my own. So I did my first recording, standalone recording in Madisonville with a group from Texas called the Singing Christians. And that's where I produced from the get-go, the whole thing. Took it all the way through an LP, manufactured all the way. Back then it was LPs.
Yeah, we still say record table too. So I'm with you there.
So anyway, that's kind of, was my start. And I just loved it. I mean, I loved the recording process. And when I was traveling with the Happy Goodman family, I would go, when we come into town somewhere, instead of sleeping all day, I'd go to the music store or a Christian bookstore, and I'd look and see what kind of material was there, what kind of records were in there. And I would make a note of it, either mentally or write it down, that they are not carrying such and such. Why are they not carrying such and such? And so I started my own company by trying to be the best recording that a singing group could get for the best budget. And that's what I did for quite some time. And singing groups came to me because of their belief of the quality of the album. Okay, well, later on, a guy named Wayne Gaskin, who is no longer with us, but he had a company called Wind Chime. You probably don't remember that. But anyway, he started doing in gospel music what they were doing over in country music, what they call radio promotion. So I didn't have radio promotion. I was just trying to record and get the best quality sound. Well, the singing groups were recording with me and said, when are you going to promote my song? I mean, I said, I can't. I don't have anybody. So it didn't take me long to figure that out, that was the direction everything was going. So I found a guy up in Ohio that was working at Radio Shack, was a fan of gospel music. He came to Nashville and became my radio promoter. His name was Dave Wilcox.
Yep, I remember Dave.
Dave's no longer with us, but he was the best radio promoter that's ever been in gospel music, in my opinion. He was way outside the box. But anyway, we were in competition with Wind Chime and Wayne Gaskin, but we took their ideas and beat them up with it. So anyway, that's kind of the way that started. And then as we were cutting good albums, good quality music, and doing radio promotion too, then that made these other singing groups interested in us because they were not being signed. Back then, there was two record labels, basically, Heartwarming and Canaan. I mean, Wind Chime was trying, but they only had a one or two groups. But it's basically Heartwarming and Canaan were the big dogs. So we stepped up to do some artists that maybe we weren't quite excited to those labels. And by having our radio promotion work hard, we believed in our artists. We thought they had something that the public would like. Maybe the record company people didn't like them much, but it wasn't their style or something. But I always believed that the public is what makes it happen. If they like you, you're good. If they don't like you, you're not so good. So that's kind of how we went with it. But anyway, we'd singing groups would come and record with us, and a lot of times they didn't have songs or didn't have enough songs, or some of the songs they had maybe weren't exactly what we felt like would play big on the radio. So we had a lot of writers that were either in a group or just standalone songwriters that were starting to send songs to us for us to do something with them. Gerald Crabb, his group came to record with us, but he was with us before that as a songwriter. And people don't know that, probably maybe not care, but that's where his songwriting got him in the door. And a lot of songwriters, and we've tried to put songs with the singing groups that fit them, but also that we believed that would touch the audience.
Right.
And God blessed us. We wound up having about 5,000 copyrights in our publishing catalog of songs when we sold it.
Well, now you have been recognized as the number one producer of Southern gospel number one songs.
Well, we had a lot of number ones, and like I said, I attribute that to God blessing. You know, he favored us. We had good songwriters, had a song that ministered to people, and we had a singing group that sung well enough to deliver that song.
I want to do one more thing. I want to play a game here. I want to go back to the Happy Goodman family. And what I want to do is I want to name the members of the Happy Goodman family. I'm going to call out a name, and you tell me the first word or phrase that comes to your mind to describe them and why. How about that?
I'll try.
Okay. Howard Goodman.
Most underrated lead singer in the business.
Vestal Goodman.
The best female singer of all time.
Sam Goodman.
Very funny, witty, a great MC.
And Rusty Goodman.
Songwriter, singer.
You wrote the song with Aaron Wilburn, What a Beautiful Day for the Lord to Come Again.
Well, that song was pretty special. At a time when Vestal was doing well, we ride the bus, going to a date somewhere. She'd look outside and said, wow, wouldn't this be a beautiful day for the Lord to come again? So Aaron Wilburn, he jumped all over it. He was playing acoustic guitar in the band. And so next thing I know, he's working on the lyrics to that song. He comes over to my house there in Madisonville, Kentucky, as my den around the piano, and read me the lyric. And God impressed me with the melody. So we put it together, and we kind of actually left out a name that was pretty big with the Happy Goodman family. His name was Johnny Crook. Probably the most successful years of the Happy Goodman family was with Johnny Crook, was with them. But anyway, Aaron Wilburn and I, we designed that song, or at least I did. He did the lyrics for whatever, but I designed the melody with Johnny Crook in mind, because he was a high tenor singer. And if you try to sing that chorus, you'll find out what I mean.
Yes. I've been in a trio with that, and I didn't want that part. I took the low part.
Yeah, it kind of got high. It got high. But it was number one for about a year, so it was nice.
Real quick, I was thinking, you know, an important part of this industry we call Southern Gospel, it is a business. I mean, yes, it's a ministry. God uses it, but it is a business, and not everyone has that knack to balance all of that. If you were talking to a younger artist, I don't know, maybe times might be different, but principles are the same. Today, what advice would you give them, or things maybe you wish you had known now having lived it? What would you say to them, a younger artist coming in today, based on your experience with the business side? Now, to be sure of your calling and have talent, that's one thing, but what would you say to them about that business side?
Well, the business side is made up of a few components, such as touring, playing performances, right? Dates,
yes,
touring, concerts. It used to be the recordings played a part in the business side. When you sell a lot of CDs or sold a lot of LPs, sold a lot of cassettes, that had an impact on a lot of people. Not only the singing group, but the writer of the song, the owner of the song, and the company that was putting out the music. So that's the business part of it. And the way we looked at it was, if we're seeking out, this is gospel music, so we're seeking out the message in the song first, the message. And it's been told in many ways and still being told. The story never gets old, though. But that's the that's the gist of it, is the message in the song. It's all about the song. A lot of singing groups get twisted, think that because they sing so pretty, that they're going to really, do well business-wise. This current environment we're in notwithstanding, but it's, in my opinion, and that's the way we built our business, was the song. It's all about the song. And if the song touches people, the business will follow it.
Great advice. Whether you are in a full-time touring group or whether you are a minister of music in a local congregation, it is about that song. Does it touch? Does it minister? And thank you. It has been an honor to talk with you today. And thank you for your gifts and leadership and legacy in gospel music. I am one of the lives that you touched, and I am thankful for you and your ministry. And it's still blessing folks. Still blessing folks. Wendell?
Well, Mr. Crook, I want to thank you once again for taking your time just to chat with us about some things. I hope this, you said this was your first Zoom experience. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we haven't asked you anything too tough, but we've enjoyed just being able to talk with you and just really just get some insight, to our gospel music history, which is something that we tried to, on this podcast, really go back and appreciate and talk about the people who've laid foundations for the Southern gospel music industry. And you certainly are a large part of that foundation that has been built upon and just still having effects through your ministry on people like myself and, of course, generations to come. And so I just want to say thank you again for being with us on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast.
I appreciate what y'all are doing for gospel music, and just keep on keeping on.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. To keep up with us, check out our Facebook page and hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. For Reverend Andy Daughtry and myself, Wendell Carr, join us next time on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. If you'd like to hear more, hit the subscribe button. While you're at it, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Grand Old Gospel Podcast for updates and video clips of the groups mentioned on this week's podcast. Also, check out our website at anchor.fm/Grand Old Gospel Podcast for a list of our current and past episodes. Until next week from the Grand Old Gospel Podcast, keep on singing a gospel song.